You know what time it is? It's R3's time where we read. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. And what better way to do that than to read, write, and comprehend for your own understanding? So we're going to jump right into it. We are continuing on reading The History of White People by Nell Irvin Painter. Book has been an eye-opener, right? Right? Okay. It has been an eye opener for us to learn the history of white people, but not in a racist connotation, but in a knowledgeable way, so that we understand where race came from. Race is a man-made construct. It's a social construct used to put people in a certain category so that others can have a power and authority and take over their demographics, take over their land, take over and enslave another group of people to have the power. That's just the total sum of it. It was a social construct. So when you hear people relating to race, make sure you try to confirm, are you meaning race because it's a social construct, or are you talking about your ethnicity? Those are two different things that we have to play on, but we are talking about race, the history of white people. So you should have read chapter 5, and chapter 5 would bring us to I believe the beauty as a science. The white beauty ideal as a science is in chapter 5. So we're going to, of course, go over chapter 5 a little bit. We may have a video also of Winkelberg. I'm sorry, is that his name? But we might have a video as well, just to give you a grasp on what it is that we read about in this chapter as well. And his name is Winkelmann. I was close enough. And then also discuss a little bit of Bloomberg and a little bit of art history. So I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. She's going to let you know where to find us in just a little bit more, and then I'll be back to break down chapter 5, the white beauty as a science. To you.
Hey y'all, this is Audrey Realize coming at you on Tuesdays. Today we are here talking about the history of whiteness. I have a beautiful hardback copy here.
Wow.
This copy belongs to my father, Willie Mims, part of his collection. You're jealous. Anyway, for history of whiteness and how whiteness was defined and constructed and later used to try to subjugate different people based on that race. Now, I did send you a video, but Winkelmann,
yeah.
Was an art history major who was fascinated with Egypt, the history of Egypt, and and the artwork and language. But what we find in when he studied his art is that his art was reflective of Greek and the Greek sculptures, which were originally painted a color that was darker than white. Might not have been black, but it was darker. And they painted them. But then people throughout history started removing the paint or replicating those sculptures and using white limestone and now representing whiteness as the perfect body and the perfect beauty. And from then on, you had people who started doing artwork that had the range. I can't remember his name right now, but the ape was a 58. Then there was 70 for the African, all the way up to 100, which was, of course, the white man. And he had these depictions on them of how the hierarchy of where they think they came from. But it's just interesting, So we meet every Tuesdays at 3. You can get us at R3 Real Lives, which will take you to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and also to the website, where you can like, share, and follow for all of those platforms for free. If you would like to donate to any of our campaigns, feeding the unhoused, book drives, scholarships, all of that stuff is on our website. You can also go on the website and sign up so that you can get weekly updates and learn what books we're reading, what times we're going to be reading, and other things that we've done. But again, at our 3 Real Lives Book Clubs, we meet every Tuesday at 3. It doesn't take that much time. Usually we only meet for about 30 minutes, and that's enough time to get a gist of the book, read about it, and discuss it. So if you want to join and you got 10 minutes, come on and jump in, send us an email, shoot us something, and let us know they're there. Usually we have Melody and Elon, who are our number 1 and 2 R3 Realizers. Oh, you're the R3 Realizers that come on the book club, but you're really, come on, let's move your ranking on up. But let's get started. Back to you, kid.
Perfect. And it's Alon. FY, if you see this later, I know it's with an A, not E. Just okay. I just wanted to throw that out there. So yeah, like she said, she referenced Blumenbach. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Blumenbach, Wickelman, and also Camper. They have different type of ranges that they're talking about race in, but they're all kind of aligned with the similar goal of having that social construct in order to have one group of people dominate over another people. I want to jump over, of course, you know, my mind works in mysterious ways, over to chapter 2. You don't have to, but if you jump over to chapter 2, we really started talking about in chapter 2 the breaking down of the Romans, the Celts, the Gauls, and the Germani. So to put that in perspective, this is when white people, or in the term these groups of people that had no name at first, they were considered Germans, Celts, Gauls, and Germani, right? They were tribes of people. When they started to break each other down, they started to give monstrous views of each other and characteristics in order to say that one group of people was better than the other. And so this is where we found that out in chapter 2. And I just wanted to start us off there so we can understand how we get from the monstrous people over to the art and beautification of people. So on page 25, the second paragraph, it just speaks a little bit about how, and I'll read from the second paragraph, the thrilling notion that monstrous people existed out there in the wide world survived well into the Enlightenment science. Carolus Linnaeus, the 18th century father of taxonomy, invented a revolutionary system that laid a durable groundwork for the naming and classifying of plants and animals. Yet even this scientific pioneer included a category of monstrous people in his classic work, which was Systema Naturae, and the monsters remained part of the accepted scientific view of humanity until Johann Friedrich Blumenbach disapproved their existence in his PhD dissertation of 1775. It says a great deal about the intellectual inertia of medieval Western society that the notions to be found in Pliny's natural history held on for 1,500 years. So I'm going to look up that word, by the way. If you know how to say it, tell it to me. Inertia. But this is basically breaking us down. Like I said, we went from the monstrous views in order to break themselves down. And when I say them, I'm referring to what we have now as color. Either you're black or you're white, right? So these white people at the time was breaking themselves down. The Germans, the Celts, the Gauls, and the Germani. And they had these categories of monstrous people that was actually founded by Linnaeus, okay, because of his 18th century view. So that was in chapter 2, just to bring you over into the the beauty part and the history part of what we'll be discussing today. So if we jump over, let's see, it's chapter 5. We're going to start on chapter 5, page 59, and that is the chapter, The White Beauty Ideal as a Science. So it just starts off speaking about Wickelman first, and then we'll jump over into Blumenbach. But for the first paragraph, I highlighted here, historians reckon Joachim Wickelman from 1717 to 1768 to be the father of art history, a fitting tribute to his importance to the field. Jump on down to the last sentence. It said, the hard, pure white aesthetic that Winckelmann popularized rested on the authority of the Renaissance, making the issue of whiteness versus color more than simply a question of taste. So this is where, with Winckelmann, they started literally having whiteness versus color. And it wasn't just a taste or an idea like, oh, I like the white better because it's pure and it's cleaner, it's minimal. This was literally broken down as a beauty science. And if you were white, you were right? If you're black, stand back. Those type of references that was coming up into play at this time. So if you jump over to page 60, we'll jump down to that second paragraph. It says, Wickelmann's main thesis held that Greek art, the finest of all time, grew out of freedom of its culture, which is ironic that it grew out of freedom of culture, but Greek art was actually stolen from Kemet, stolen from what is Egypt. But remember, Egypt is the Greek terminology, Greek name for Kemet. It was also called Alkebulan, whichever name goes farther back for you that you can relate it to. But when you hear the word Egypt, know that that was stolen from Kemet, and the Greeks named it Egypt. That's a Greek name. So I just find it ironic that it grew out of the freedom of its culture when it stole everything it knew from Kemet, Africa. Then it goes on to say, going further, Winckelmann advanced the notion that modern Westerners should embrace the Greek way of life and freedom to achieve Greek excellence in art and presumably all of culture. So when it goes into the Westerners, you have to automatically think, right, of the Westerners, Americans, right? You think of this, and they're taking these ideals back over to America, because nothing but criminals came to America in the first place. But they're taking their ideals over to America, and they really are trying to establish the way of life of freedom, right? Because they're escaping their own quote unquote oppression or suppression from their own people. And so they came over to America to start the colonies, right? And so if you just think of that in that terms, that they thought they were taking a sense of freedom by enslaving a whole nother group of people simply by the color of their skin and justifying it with these terminologies. So it goes on to say that not only did he establish a chronology and canon of ancient art, he also championed an ideology of ancient Greek beauty based on his own gay male aesthetic. I just highlighted that, not even to be funny. Shout out to the LGBTQ and sometimes Y groups, but it gives in perspective why a lot of our society now is based around this aesthetic. And you'll see a lot of the gay people or the LGBT people always play on these certain characteristics and mimic other groups of people, or mimic black women at that. So I just found it very interesting that Winckelmann is playing on this Greek beauty based on his own gay aesthetic, because he was known to be that. Yes, I have a hand raised.
Oh, I just wanted to say that. I mean, I know how it reads today, but I think for the context, history context, that gay was happy.
Yes, but it does say that he was.
He has fascination with little boys, but I know, the beauty of young boys. But yes. I think that the gay term meant happy. That's what I read it as, because I was just trying to get myself back into the time period, and it just means happy.
Okay, no, I got that. I also was getting it from, that's fine, we'll come back to page 60. Well, I just want to point out the quote so I don't bring it back up, but on page 63, it just kind of referenced that Winckelmann was murdered in Trieste in 1768 under questionable circumstances on his way back to Dresden from Rome. His most recent biographer contends that the murder occurred in the course of a robbery that Winckelmann was resisting, but other authorities suspect that Winckelmann, an older gay man with a taste of adventure, ran afoul of rough trade.
Well, okay. Well, yeah.
So
yeah, I did read that.
Okay, so that's kind of where I was just making a comparative analysis of both of them and getting that idea at that time that it might not have been the term of that, and it could have been happy, but maybe it's happy and doing what you want to do because you're rich and you're powerful. But I was just adding it in. But I agree that terminology is a more recent thing, that using that term gay is more recent now in the way we think of the definition than it was then. But I did get that on page 63 from him getting murdered. So it said a foul, a rough trade. What was his rough trade? But if you read connotation 7, actually, it actually gives some insight. Let's see if I can bring it up. So that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Hey, where is it? Okay, I have to go to the back of the book. What chapter is this? 5?
Yeah.
So if we go to the connotation in the back, remember, always read the connotations as well, guys. It gives you a little bit more insight in which, here we go, in what we're reading. So chapter 5, what I say, 7? So we can refer to Potts, flesh, and the ideal. Pater, Winckelmann, 185, 192. Butler, tyranny of Greece over Germany. That's where she got it from. I just want to throw that quote out there for the note. Okay, for what I was saying. So back to page 60, and then it just mentions a little bit more of him, and it says in that same paragraph, not only did he establish a chronology, I already said that part, I'm sorry. So the last sentence on that last paragraph, it says, clearly human beings find people like themselves beautiful. I just got that because we're always talking about, dating outside of our race and things like that. And it's not necessarily having a hate towards another group of people, but it's seeing the beauty within your own self. So I like that statement actually to point out that it was people find themselves beautiful that look like themselves, because you should always be proud of yourself and look like yourself and want to create things that look like you. And that's a quote from Muhammad Ali. Actually, I will want somebody that I have to look like me. Nobody wants to blot out their race, he said, actually, to quote him. So I got that in a positive aspect, not necessarily in the time and what they were trying to do, but I understand and can relate to it, especially now, and having that love of thyself. On page 61, 61, second paragraph, it says, unaware that the Greek originals were often dark in color, he did not know or glossed over the knowledge that the Greeks routinely painted their sculptures. He saw only Roman versions of beautiful young men carved of hard Italian marble that shone a gleaming white. Thus, Winckelmann elevated Rome's white marble copies of Greek statuary and emblems of beauty and created a new white aesthetic. It would apply not only to the works from antiquity, not only to Greek art, but to all art and all of humanity. For Winckelmann and his followers, color and sculpture came to mean barbarism, and for they assumed that the lofty ancient Greeks were too sophisticated to color their art. So although he's getting all of this information, he literally just put with color. Once again, we see that the harshness of slavery was always depicted to those that had darker skin, and the more lavish versions of slavery, or the sexual exploitation of slavery, to be seen as beauty, because remember we talked about white slavery, was always with the lighter skin. And then you have Winckelmann here that's seeing that the color in any sculpture, any art, was considered barbaric. So I mean, if you just put it in the context, you will see where it's coming into play, that they're using black or the darker skinned people as something negative all the time, and they're trying to take themselves away from it. They also bring up the notion that living further from the equator or more in the sun. I'll read that quote in a minute. That's where that came from, saying that people who are more in the sun are darker, therefore that's bad, and then people who are living in colder climates are lighter skinned. So we'll get into that in a second. On page 63, we hear about the aesthetic again. So the Parthenian marbles Elgin took to Britain do consist of marble, but a darkly pitted Greek marble rather than the smooth, snowy white variety more common in Italy. Here lay an aesthetic problem, white versus color. So this is an aesthetic. It didn't clash for them. It wasn't looking right. White versus color, right? And if you can see too, like on the poster, you have black, you have white, you have gold. This is what they're dealing with, the colors side by side to each other. So it says that the alarming history of European marble cleaning includes a chapter on this statuary describing a drive to make ancient Greek art white that nearly destroyed the art itself. In the 1930s, workers in the British Museum were directed to remove the dark patina with metal tools on the mistaken assumption that their proper color could be white. Such a cleaning seriously damaged the Parthenian marbles, prompting an inquiry by the museum's standing committee that halted the work. Clearly, Winckelmann's obsession with whiteness had a large and lingering downside. So as you can see, he had this obsession with whiteness. He had this obsession to make everything like the Greek marble statues of young boys. And then this turned into them scraping and scratching away and prodding, similar to what we have now, this issue with bleaching. Everybody's trying to get rid of the color, and we're trying to match a certain aesthetic, and I use that word a lot, especially with social media. You don't match the aesthetic, and they're bleaching their skin. They're doing all this different stuff that's going to end up being the downfall eventually, but we'll get to that later. But this all derived from trying to identify beauty as white and color as bad. Okay, period, point blank. On page 64, we talk about Goethe. I always say his name wrong, but it's Goethe. Second paragraph, it says, Goethe first encountered Winckelmann's work as a student in Leipzig in the mid-1760s. During his 1786 and 88 visit to Italy, Goethe employed Winckelmann's letters and books as guides, just as Ralph Waldo Emerson would rely on Goethe's Italian travels of 1870. I won't get into Ralph Waldo Emerson because there's a whole chapter on him here, and I don't want to repeat anything I'm saying, but he is also seen as the father of this terminology of Caucasian and whiteness, okay? So we'll talk about him a little bit later if you don't know about him. If you jump down over to page 65, just some best-known illustrators were Petrus Camper, and we'll speak about him, of the Netherlands, and Johann Caspar Lavater of Switzerland. They intended to elaborately illustrated books for artists as well as natural scientists. So this is where they started measuring skulls. This is where they put chimpanzees, whites, and the black Africans or in their terms, Negroes, next to each other and comparing their skulls, where their mouths protruded, where their nose is big, where they're wide, what was the length from their forehead down to their chin, or their forehead to their eyes. This is where this is coming into play. So on 65, if you jump down, second paragraph, it says Camper's most famous chart, likely drawn in the 1770s, but not published until 1792 after his death, delivers sharply conflicting messages in a deeply confusing manner. And it says to see figure 5.3, Camper's chart of contrasted faces. I just described it to you. I'll show you in a moment. Apparently comparing faces and skulls as viewed straight on with lines drawn through several points of each skull and the face. The chart is intended to depict the facial angles of an orangutan chimpanzee at the top left, a Negro, a Kalmuk, over to a European, and Apollo Belvedere, in that order. So we're going to jump over and show you. This is Petrus Camper's chart of the 1770s on page 66. And if you're following along, how so, you can turn to that. And as you can see, in that order, this is how it looks. Okay. And then he numbered them. Not only did he put them in that order with their names next to them, he numbered them. So it says, the author writes, the numbers associated with the chart 58, 70, 80, and 100 do in fact reveal Negro and Kalmuk facial angles closer to the European than to the orangutan or chimpanzee, and less separate from the European than European from the Greek god. This Camper maintained was his message, whose fundamental meaning laying in his numbers. He insisted on the unity of mankind, even going so far as to suggest that Adam and Eve might well have been black. I highlighted that because it's funny that he knew this. If anybody was the founders of civilization and humanity, they would be black. I just want to make that point. Period, point blank. But the fact that he knew this even then, that he said they may have well been black, after he's comparing this and using this as a comparative analysis to an orangutan, it just shows you how history was twisted in order to favor those who wanted to oppress, those who wanted to colonize, and those who wanted power. And we'll just say that. On page 67, 67, we'll read second sentence down. By the mid-19th century, methodical measurers of skulls had denounced Camper's simplistic reliance on a single head measurement. But even as Camper lost scholarly standing in the continental Europe, scientific racists in Britain and the United States, such as Robert Knox J. Knott and G.R. Glydion, went on reproducing his images as irrefutable proof of white supremacy that Camper himself had never embraced. So I wanted to point that out because we talk a lot sometimes and we can't take away the racism from people who may have been doing right. And so clearly, like I said, he knew this even at this time, but the people who wanted power, control, and to colonize and oppress another group of people took his words, twisted it, even though he didn't really align it at that time with white supremacy and racism at the time. But technically he did, because this was his ideals and the foundation. But the terminology white supremacy was not coined until later on, and it was taken by Britain and taken by the United States, which goes hand in hand together. One escaping oppression only to oppress the other, is how I see it. Simple, right? No? Okay. The second guy on page 68 is Dr. John Hunter from 1728 to 93. He was an overbearing, arrogant, and unpolished Scot who had served as a surgeon in the British Army during the 7 years in the French and Indian War in North America. It just speaks about him briefly, and I just wanted to read that because being overbearing, arrogant, and unpolished as a Scot, it just puts into context that a lot of people like to excuse the Scottish and the Scot for anything to do with slavery, but they were also involved in a lot of racial things as well. So I just wanted to point that out. But on 69, or I'll continue reading, I'm sorry. Dr. John Hunter. So it says that 7 years war in America. Returning to London in 1763 and now possessed of much practical knowledge, he gained his high patronage position, Surgeon Extraordinary to the King, Surgeon General of the Army, Inspector of Army Hospitals through advantageous political connections in prosperous Hanoverian London. By the mid-1780s, Hunter also enjoyed the recognition conferred by membership in several learned societies. So I'm just pointing that out because they keep it in the family, basically. He was given these opportunities Yeah, we'll keep reading. So on page 69, it says scholarly communication between Europe and England flourished. Hunter, who we were just speaking about, knew Camper's work, and like Camper, had analyzed a series of human and animal skulls to illustrate gradations of vertical profile, and exercise rather similar to Camper's work on the facial angle. Hunter, and I highlighted this here, Hunter compared various human skulls, the European, the Asian, the American, and the African, to the skulls of an ape, a dog, and an alligator. And although he specifically denied any hierarchical intent, Hunter's imagery inspired the obstetrician Charles White, 1728 to 1813, to think about race as a physical appearance. So this is where race and how you look and the literally color of your skin became a physical appearance. I also wanted to just point out, did you guys notice from the beginning of the chapter to now, we only started off with 3 different types. I think it was Mongoloid, the African, and then the white people, basically. And now we have gotten to the European, the Asian, the American, and the African. So quickly how they're changing over and further dividing people by the color of their skin, the content of their character, to quote Martin Luther King. Okay, so that is him. On page 70, it speaks about a little bit, and I'll show you the chart as well compared to the now. Matter of fact, I'll show now. So this is Charles White's human chart that we just spoke about, and it's being compared to the alligator, the dog, the ape, with the African. So I'm going to zoom in there. Okay, if you guys see that, and that's on page 71. On page 70, I just highlighted halfway down, about the 4th sentence down, White surmises. So White surmises that different colored humans grew from separate acts of divine creation. This view, soon known as polygenesis, traced humanity to more than one origin of Genesis. Polygenesis went on to flourish in the mid-19th century among racists of the American School of Anthropology. While the publication of The Origin of Species in 1859 much reduced the allure of creationism of all kinds, Darwinism did not kill off polygenic thinking entirely. So although Darwinism comes into play and saying how we evolved, right, it did not eliminate that completely. And they came up with this own idea of the origin of species and going back and comparing us to alligators and dogs. So even if you think of slavery here in the United States and how they used to feed babies, African babies, to alligators, they considered us pets. It's always a running joke in the black family that, you know, white people, in this terminology, dealing with race and the social construct of white people, not to be racist, but they consider their pets more of a human being than black people, right? Or we hear that they shot him down in the street like a dog. This is because they see no difference in the African and the dark-skinned people than that of an alligator, a dog, or an ape. You want to add anything to that? Okay. No? Okay. And then we're just going to jump in. That was chapter 5. So, and again, chapter 5, we were just discussing the art history, but it was the white beauty ideal as a science. So this is where the science is breaking up. We're going from the science and the measurement of your face, your eyes, your lips, your nose. You're getting the sizes of your cranium, your head. They're comparing us and the way our mouths may protrude out. Maybe your nose is wider, your lips are bigger, and they're comparing that to animals, alligators, apes. And I just wanted to say for the record that animals aren't deserving of cruel acts either, but the fact that they're relating us to an animal and darker skinned people and their tribes of people that they felt had different characteristics than the pure whites is where we see the science of white beauty come into play. So if we just jump in and just the introduction into chapter 6, because Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, he's the person that names white people as Caucasian. And I got this on my last comment for YouTube. I just wanted to kind of read it really quick and point it out, but we're going to discuss chapter 6 next week, so be there. But so the author goes on to write, and when I say author, I mean Nell Irvin Painter. She says, a reader might sensibly wonder why the social sciences, the criminal justice system, and indeed much of the English-speaking world label white people as Caucasians. Why should this category have sprung from the troublesome mountainous borderland just north of Turkey, from the peoples perpetually at war with Russia, and the present-day regions of Chechnya, Stavropol, Krai, Dagestan, Ingushetia, North Ossetia, South Ossetia, and Georgia? That was a question. And she goes on to answer that the long story begins in the Göttingen, Lower Saxony in 1795, and the better known part of it belongs to Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. And then you can see, I'll show you guys a picture later of him. But it goes on to speak about this and his creation of his dissertation on the natural variety of mankind. So next week we'll jump into that. We have 10 minutes left. Did you send the link? Can you put it in the chat? What's going on?
What's that?
Did you want to play your video still? I have 10 minutes left here.
You have how many?
9 and counting.
Oh, I think it's on. Do you have it, or you want me to get it?
If you could put the link in, great. If not, I have to try to get it. So let me go to my email here.
It's just a short, just talking about Winkleman.
I went over a little bit. Sorry. So you want to tell the people where they can find us, just in case we get cut off now?
Oh, this is a YouTube video, and it's on Art and Winkleman, and they have various videos.
Okay, you put it in the chat?
Yeah.
And remember, you won't be able to hear it.
Okay, I'll be quiet. I'll watch it now myself. Bye.
Okay. How long is it?
2 minutes.
Okay. You should be able to wrap up still, so come right back. We're opening it now, if it's going to do it. All right.
A friendship forged in art. The neoclassical portrait of Johann Joachim Winckelmann in the splendid collection of the Met Fifth Avenue, Gallery 627, stands an artwork that celebrates the life and legacy of a man who revolutionized the study of ancient Greek art. Anton Raphael Mengs' posthumous portrait of Johann Joachim Winckelmann is not just a painting, it is a tribute to a friendship that transcended borders and boundaries. Winckelmann's groundbreaking work, History of Ancient Art published in 1764, established him as the founder of modern art history and archaeology. His insights into the beauty and harmony of classical art inspired the neoclassical movement and influenced generations of artists and travelers. Mengs' portrait captures this influence with a grace that transcends time. In this masterpiece, Mengs honors his friend and mentor with exquisite detail. Winckelmann is depicted holding a Greek edition of Homer's Iliad, a symbol of his deep knowledge of classical literature and his contributions to the rediscovery of ancient Greek art. Every element tells a story, every color evokes an emotion. The white linen shirt open at the neck signifies Winckelmann's simplicity and elegance. His expression, though obscured in our reproduction, reflects serenity and dignity, a soul that has...
Okay, perfect. So that's Winckelmann, a video that we actually see for him. And I just want to reiterate who Winckelmann is. That picture is actually in the book as well, so you can go ahead and see that painting picture on page 60, because the author Nell Irvin Painter made sure we really had a lot of information, a lot of context to back it up. But Johann, I said his name wrong. I just want to re-quote that he is the one who's making the issue of whiteness versus color more than simply a question of taste, but a white beauty ideal as a science. So this is the one who starts it off and really making it as a science, and his works will be able to be passed down later on for white supremacists and racists in order to take over other people and colonize them. And so we're going to end there. We have 5 minutes left. I'm going to pass it over to our hostess with the mostest. And just know that you need to see the beauty and within yourself. It has nothing to do with race, because that was a social construct to take over another group of people and have power and control. But look in the mirror and see yourself, like Michael Jackson said, I'm searching for the man in the mirror, not for somebody else. And remember to judge people off the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And this is R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self. I'm going to pass it over to hostess with the mostest, to you.
Hey, thank you for coming and joining us today. This is R3 Real Lives Book Club, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism, like she just said. Right now we're reading The History of Whiteness by Nell Irvin Painter. Pick it up if you want to understand the social constructs and how it really started in the late 1700s with them re-identifying paintings and sculptures as white to uphold that purity notion that they had and try to separate and segregate people based on race, not based on who they were, where they live, their body type, what they ate. It's, just hold up this purity of whiteness. And it started with art, and it then explored into archaeology, where they started, archaeologists were big time racists and liars. And so they would find things, and either if they were great, they would make them white. If they weren't so great, they make them black or close to an ape. But anyway, we're here every Tuesdays at 3. You can get us at R3 Real Life Book Club by going on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and to the website where you can like, share, follow for free. At the website, you can sign up so that you can be notified of any upcoming campaigns that we have, the new books or any information. And you can also email us or instant message us on any of the other platforms, and we will get back to you. Come on and join us. Why don't you join us and be a realizer? We got a couple of realizers that are road dogs for life. And we want you to be one too. You can do that by participating, by buying a book, by reading the excerpt of the book, by questioning us, the content. We're available for it all. We are not afraid of your call. But again, at R3 Real Life, back to you, kid.
Okay, perfect. And with 3 minutes left, I'm just going to wrap up on page 4, which introduced us to chapter 5, the white beauty ideal as a science. I'm just going to reiterate here that nowadays both the reality of harem white slavery and the figure of the odalisque have largely disappeared, going the way of that slavery itself, just as Norman conquest of England's small kingdoms dampened slavery there. A European and Turkish imperial power closed down long-range slaving out the Black Sea region. In the West, an abolitionist movement ended the Atlantic slave trade by the mid-19th century. In the East, around the same time, Russia abolished slavery and severely curtailed the Eastern European and Caucasian slave trade. As this slavery faded, so did its iconography, but ideals of white beauty endured. They have become firmly embedded in the science of race, and it has become firmly embedded in the science and culture that we have now today. So just remember that race is a social construct, and it was founded by these people. I'm Naila. I'm your CEO and your founder of R3, Real Eyes, Real Lives, Real Lives, where we promote knowledge of self through education and activism. And like our host has said, show up, be a realizer, use your real eyes, and make sure you read with us every Tuesday. Peace. Or we say 3.
3.